And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Joe at Jonas Cigars. I am going to be interviewing Daniel Lance of Domain Cigars. I have got one of his releases right here. This is the Domain Neutron. Terrible with names. Domain Neutron. Last night I smoked the Domain Negentropy. That was a Habano. That one was really impressive. This is a Maduro San Andreas wrapper. Really looking forward to trying this on. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and bring on Daniel to the stream. Daniel, thank you very much for joining us today. How are you tonight, sir?
Yeah, thanks for having us. We're coming to you from the Lit Cigar Lounge in St. Louis. It's a fantastic family-owned lounge here in St. Louis, and they carry Domain Cigars, so you're going to be able to get a fantastic cigar while you're here. But if there's any background noise, there's people having a great time behind me, so we don't want to prevent that.
So tell us a little bit about what I'm getting ready to light up right now. This is the Neutron, and I've got the Robusto, which is a box press Robusto. Tell us a little bit about the blend, thought process behind it, and then we'll go into Domain in general after that.
Sure. So Neutron is a Mexican San Andreas over Nicaraguan filler and binder. What size are you smoking there?
I believe this is the well,
it's okay. So
5x56.
So 5x56. So we ratio blend all the sizes of the cigars. We have 9 different sizes in that blend. Right. So the prime blend of that line is a 52 Robusto Extra, and then we sell that out ratio of tobacco equal ratios, adequate size leaves, and try to make as much a blend as possible that kind of stays inside of a rich flavor wheel. So that cigar actually, happened as a result of a conversation that Esteban and I had at dinner one night, and I was asking him about different cigars from 10 plus years ago, where people were taking mostly Sumatras, and they were blending Sumatras into areas of the flavor wheel that I just hadn't really seen in 10 plus years. And I had never seen anyone take a Mexican San Andreas and actually make it a true medium bodied cigar. So, and I know you're just smoking this for the first time. You told me that, but for me, the flavor notes that I get on it, I'm curious as to what your notes are. I get almost kind of a French oak kind of note to it, some cedar in the background, very smooth, retro hell, very smooth. And what we did was we wanted a cigar that would kind of call back to some of those blends that were these really heavily modified examples of what was being done with Sumatra. Kind of one of the background stories of Sumatra now, as we've kind of gone through the tobacco genome, is the Sumatra plant originated in Sumatra, but then was grown all throughout Indonesia, then was grown in Cameroon, Africa. That's where your Cameroon comes from. It's actually a Sumatra variety. And then it was transplanted into Ecuador. So what does this matter when we're talking about a Mexican San Andreas? Well, it's the conversation I was having with Esteban because I was asking him, how did they offset the Sumatra to downplay some of the characteristics of the tobacco? And he said that they were basically using a lot of, heavily acidic or saline kind of tobaccos, and that it was really hard to maintain those blends. And so I asked him, could we do that kind of treatment where we can actually tweak the San Andreas into a really hard flavor representation like what I saw 10 plus years ago with all those Sumatras? And he goes, I think we could do that today with the tobacco we already have, because I think that we have an aggressive enough approach. And we'll kind of talk about some of this later with the Despinique process of fermentation, where we've actually, gone through and really tweaked how fermentation on our tobacco is done to represent the tobaccos entirely differently. I like to compare that cigar to like a salted watermelon, because the flavors are just so bold and vivid and richer than what you would expect from Mexican San Andreas that, frankly, have been typecasted as a medium full or full bodied cigar. We haven't oftentimes seen that cigar be offset into a medium body with just rich compound flavors.
Yeah, a lot of times when you get something that's really full-bodied, some of the nuance kind of gets lost in the mix, and you're basically distracted by the strength of the cigar as opposed to the layering and the delicacies that can be occurring when you get something that's kind of drawn back the body strength a little bit there. So
yeah, I completely agree. Yeah.
So you work with Esteban Disla. How
Yep.
did you get into a partnership situation with him, and what made you want to start a company with him in the first place with Domain?
Well, I'm the junkie that moved to the poppy field, is what I tell people. That's kind of a funny way of saying it, but really, I mean, I was a big cigar fan, a big cigar geek, nerd, if you will,
Yeah.
and I found a community there in Esteli, no different than many of you have found a community in your local lounges, and I ended up moving to Esteli actually, and I had no plans or ambition of starting a cigar company. It wasn't on my agenda moving out there. I mean, I was just wanting to learn more about tobacco. And Anthony actually asked me one time. He goes, "Why is it that you never thought about opening a brand?" Because I had started lots of companies in my background, and I go, "Well, people that make really delicious cigars are just never available." so really wasn't on my
Yeah,
agenda.
no, it's a pretty good
But
reason.
yeah, I mean, they're just, there's so few of people that understand tobacco to that degree. And, at the time that I moved to Nicaragua, I was already, 30 years old. There wasn't really a chance for me to restart my life to focus on that the way that Esteban had already done. He's been working on tobacco since he was 11 years old. So, there was a lot of things that were going on in Esteli at the time. Of course, we had the whole pandemic thing that occurred, and Esteban and I had a lot of opportunities to really understand each other's values and get to know each other, much better than we ever had before. And I used to stop by the factory all the time and have a cigar. And just one of those occasions that I hit up Anthony and I said, "Hey, I'm coming up," because I eventually moved to Managua. There wasn't very much utility, me being in Esteli, during all that going on. They didn't really want you coming around the factory if you're not essential,
Right. Yeah.
So one of those times that I was coming up to Esteli, Anthony goes, "Well, we're not doing cigars anymore." And I go, "How is that? How is that possible? That's all your family does is cigars." So I, met up with Esteban and Anthony, and you want your friend to feel valuable and useful, and it's something that he's passionate about. So I just casually asked him. I go, "Well, how about you make me a cigar?" So I go, "I don't really know if I'm buying a bundle of cigars or if I'm buying a single cigar or what I'm doing here." And I met up with Esteban, and he already had a vision for this. I mean, he was a mile down the road with the planning and preparation. And of course, I lived there in Nicaragua, and I still do to this day. But I still have a home in the States. Of course, I'm American and proud to be so. But the thing is I had moved to Nicaragua to learn more about tobacco, and that had been stunted dramatically. So when they started growing tobacco, Raul and Esteban, I would show up, I would try the tobacco, I would, go visit the farms and see what they're working on. And I've been following along the whole time, learning from them as much as I could pick up. And, whenever the decision came for him to, hand in the keys and he walked away from a factory that was very successful, that he helped co-found and help blend a lot of those cigars that have become very triumphant in the industry. I didn't realize at the time that his forward-thinking vision was always to do 100% vertical integration. He always wanted to approach the industry to be able to control quality control from soil to smoke, and that's actually what it says on the bottom of our boxes is from soil to smoke, because we're able to actually influence the cigar all the way through. So really, it was me. I had to get up to speed on the vision because today, Domain's story is the story of the Disla family. It really is.
Now, for the casual cigar smoker, they may or may not know the history of Esteban Disla and just how storied his past is when it comes to the tobacco industry, particularly with cigars. So for those watching at home wondering who is Esteban, give us a little backstory on who Esteban Disla is.
Yeah, so I mean, that story really starts with his mother, Aurora, in Dominican Republic. So he was a young man in Dominican Republic. His mother, Aurora, was working for factories, pitching in. She had two sons to take care of, Raul and Esteban. And, basically, she was very interested. She was a very curious person, and curious people are often interesting people. So the farmers had taken a liking to her, and they had offered at one point, they had a plot of land. It was like 2 hectares of land. Didn't really perform that well. The yield was bad and everything. And, she would talk to the farmers all the time. So they eventually offered to allow her to, farm that land for them. They weren't going to. The yields were bad. So they put in the tobacco, and Aurora, his mother, and Raul, his brother, and Esteban worked that land, and they actually produced the highest yield that plot of land had ever produced. And the farmers were all very taken back, and that's really where Sergio Cuevas kind of entered the picture, because he saw the talent, the passion that these two young men had in Raul and Esteban, and basically took him under his wing. And just to show you the kind of people that they are, Aurora, his mother, it was the first time that they had ever really had any substantial money, because the farmers made good on their promise. When she, brought in the really good yields, they actually, went out and paid her as they were supposed to, right? And the next season, that same farmer offered her the same deal to farm the land, but his daughter had gotten sick, and his daughter needed an operation, needed to some kind of a stomach virus or something that farmer's daughter had. And Aurora actually gave all of her proceeds to help his daughter. So you just see how strong that community is. It was the first time that they had ever really felt any real success, and they were, able to pour it onto someone else. So that really endeared the family, the Disla family, to a lot of these people. Sergio Cuevas, he took Raul and Esteban under his wing, taught him fermentation, taught him farming. Esteban got so good at picking tobacco, fermented tobacco, that he earned the name Guamaro. And Guamaro is a Pacific region in Cuba. Very few people come from this really little region, but they're known for picking exceptional tobaccos. So Esteban became the guy that Sergio Cuevas would send around to go, purchase tobacco. Sergio Cuevas was, of course, a very iconic Cuban cigar maker that had defected from Cuba and went to the Dominican Republic. He was actually one of the key people that helped build out the prominence of Dominican cigars throughout the 80s and 90s. So really substantial figure to the cigar community. Now, Esteban had been picking tobacco from all over the world, so he saw the quality that was coming out of Nicaragua 25 years ago. He got the opportunity to go to to go to Nicaragua to help select tobacco. And at that, out and around that time, Latin America Cigars was forming, and Esteban got a job working with them and helped build up Latin America Cigars. That was a company that ended up producing Tarano, CAO, Alec Bradley, Cohiba, a whole myriad of 30 plus different brands. And eventually Esteban worked his way up to being chief of production for that company, which today you all probably know it as STG or General Cigar. So that's what his background initially was. From there, he always had the vision. He wanted to be a vertically integrated cigar maker. That was what he kind of idolized into his future, and he wanted to will into existence was to be able to do that someday from being a young man working in the field. So in the Valley of Esteli, there's only two people, and one of them's Esteban Disla, that have actually worked their way through every single position in cigar making, to owning a factory, to growing their own tobacco, to now owning a brand. So it's a really substantial story that the Disla family has. It's, whenever I walk into a humidor and I see the number of brands that he's worked on throughout the years, and any given humidor, it might be an eighth to a third of cigars that might be on the shelf, and that's not an underestimate. I mean, it's a sizable portfolio that he's worked on, and ghost blended a lot of cigars for other factories. But
right,
from his time working at Latin America Cigars, he went on to co-found a little factory called Nicasueño, which makes some very prominent cigars in the market. And again, whenever he found creative differences in that relationship, it created the opportunity for me as a friend. But again, I didn't have any thought or intention to do that. Of course, every cigar smoking guy has a desire,
right?
Right?
Yeah.
There's a desire there, of course, but I didn't really suspect the opportunity for us to work together like that to come about, or to come about as soon as it did. But really happy to do so. And it's a fantastic family. The Disla family, including Raul, who is the master blender for Noxa, who makes some very prominent cigars in the industry. They've touched premium cigars in Nicaragua 25 years ago, seeing the future of where, you know, this whole cigar market was going to go. And I mean, I think the accuracy in his working with tobacco is just evident in the place that he chose to live. You know, it's another thing, like Aurora said to Esteban and Raul, if you're going to do anything in life, you need to be the best at what you do.
Sure.
So if you're, it doesn't matter if you have a small job, a small part in your company or otherwise, you need to be the best at what you do. And, you know, Esteban could have, you know, made a right turn and went up to Miami and been a bartender. We always joke that he would have made more money. but no, I mean, he followed his passion all the way through. And, you know, 40 years of cigar making now, you know, he's a 50-year-old person with an incredible future ahead of him. And we're just, you know, overcome with excitement to be able to share Domain Cigars with you today.
I just want to take a moment to show everybody just the excellence of construction that we're getting on this one. This is just a great burn line. The ash is super tight. And this is something, Daniel, that gets me a little bit excited. I always notice when there's tooth on a wrapper, it always gets me a little bit giddy that there's going to be some nice flavor there. It's even more impressive when you can still see the tooth on the ash after it's burned. That's always kind of a fun thing for me. You know, you talked a lot about how, you know, Esteban always, you know, his ideal in his mind was having a vertically integrated company. And I don't feel like that can be emphasized enough, how important that characteristic is for a cigar brand. Because the ones that are vertically integrated, at the very least, the ones that oversee the fermentation of the tobacco in particular, those are the ones that are a cut above the rest. And those are the ones that I feel like separate the men from the boys when it comes to cigar blending. And talk us through a little bit about the unique process that you talk about on your website a little bit. I'd like to get a little bit more of an elaboration of your fermentation process that you talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So you know, really, we operate three companies today. We have Domain Cigars, we have Tabacalera Family Distillate, that's our factory. Mm-hmm. And then we have Desponique Process, which is our tobacco growth and brokerage. And the fermentation, you hit the nail on the head, is paramount to keeping consistency. There's, you know, kind of three major waves of cigar making. We like to call ourselves a third wave cigar maker, and that's a whole topic of conversation we can get into. But whenever it comes to maintaining your supply chain, maintaining consistency of the tobacco, you really have to be able to control fermentation at the end of the day. So what Esteban learned from Sergio Cuevas was the traditional style pilon or loaf, where you take, you know, a hectare or two of land and you take all the tobaccos from that and you basically put it together into one very large pilon. And, you know, sometimes that's a circular pilon, sometimes that's an elongated pilon. They, you know, the thermodynamics are better on the elongated pilons. That's why you always see that. But what they would do is they would stack, you know, Seco, Viso, Ligero, everything all in one, even sometimes Sandleaf and so on. Mm-hmm. So the modified version going into the Dominican Republic was to actually start separating the different primings. And if you're doing a smaller batch fermentation, now some people, when they ferment, they will still throw everything all together. That's still a practice that's done today by a lot of different groups. But the more traditional version for a high quality fermentation is to actually separate as you're priming the tobaccos, taking them out of the field. You wait about 5 days between priming, string them up, and we string them up. If you ever see the strings, they have different colors on the strings, right? Mm-hmm. And that indicates what plant it actually, or what level from the plant it comes from. So whenever they, in the Dominican Republic, whenever they pull secos, they'll pull all the secos and that goes into one pilon. And then they'll pull all the visos and that goes into one pilon. And same thing with the Ligeros, and they'll actually divide out the plant and then they put those separately into different pilons. The reason they do that is they want as much offset flavor to get the depth out of that tobacco so that the tobacco doesn't composite. So a lot of the Cuban style pilons, they're compositing together, right? Right. So you get all the different primings, but then they composite together in fermentation. So what the heck do they do in Nicaragua that's different, right? So what they're doing differently in Nicaragua is because we're a little bit lower, right? We have a little bit different pressure when we grow tobacco. we tend to get a little bit thinner tobaccos on your level 3 primings. So that means whenever we go into Secco, the very bottom. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was commenting.
Oh.
That's it. I did not know that. Yeah, I did not know that.
So a lot of people, whenever they are harvesting Secco, level 3 Secco is normally stripped away. So that's the very bottom leaf of Secco. It's not volato, it's not quite sand leaf, right? But it's going to be thinner because that leaf is stretching out a lot more to grab more of the sun. So a lot of times that gets pulled out. Sometimes it'll end up in a polone, but it'll get separated. And then they'll do the same thing with the level 3 Viso and possibly even level 3 Ligero, right? Although Ligero, oftentimes you see them use all of that because the leaf is going to be a little bit thicker. So the traditional method of separating and stripping away flavor compounds that you don't want, Esteban looked at that and Raul looked at that and they said, well, how do we modify and tweak this so that we have a little bit of the traditional compositing, but we're able to enforce the offset flavors? So what happens whenever you're tasting a leaf that's not quite finished is you have a leaf that is fairly acidic and you're trying to move it into more of an alkaline, or you have something that is very bold and you're trying to mellow it out, right? So fermentation naturally is going to pull the tobacco to be in a little bit mellower offset. That's just what happens with heat, temperature, time. Nature
of fermentation, right? Yeah,
it's the nature of fermentation. So what we do in the Despenink process is we separate all the Seccos because Condega Secco, Esteli Secco, and Jalapa Secco, and Pueblo Nuevo, and we have Pueblo Nuevo farms as well. So we have 3 key farms, but the Secco will have a unique offset. So we put that in a separate polone. They're also a different size of leaf, right? And then what we do with the Viso and Ligero, we'll put Viso on bottom, right? We'll put Ligero on top. And then what we do is we take those L3 Ligeros and the L3 Visos, level 3s, and we'll actually scatter those every 4 or 5 different bunches of tobacco in the polone, and they get inserted between the tobaccos. And what we're doing is we're inoculating the bolder, heavier tobaccos with the lighter tobaccos so that when they come out of fermentation, they maintain more bold characteristics. And that allows us to play with the offset flavors and create more dramatic, more vivid flavors in the tobacco. And it's all completely natural. And this is one of those really unique ways that Esteban and Raul think about how they approach tobacco is, how do you take something instead of stripping away what you don't want, and how do you use that to reinforce the flavors and the compounds that you do want from that tobacco? So instead of creating a polone that is meant to mellow out the tobacco to an almost absolute degree by the time it's actually finished fermentation, before the stems are buckling and, right at, if it's Condega, you're at 140 or so in turns, 160 on the higher end of thicker leaves. But how do you actually do this so that you maintain more rich, bolder flavors? And that's precisely what they've been doing for the last 5 years. So I just get to report about it. It wasn't my idea, but I sound smart when I say it.
Hey, to be able to communicate to people what they're doing, I mean, that's great. I mean, the cigar nerd in me is just, I'm eating this up. This is just fantastic. I'm always been fascinated by the process. And when you start talking about, they would have, multiple different primings of the leaf, all kind of compositing like that. And it sounded like using that method, it almost made the flavors more homogeneous as opposed to getting them to develop their own unique characteristics when you get them separated in their own individual polones.
Yeah, the Cuban style is more homogeneous tobacco, right? Which can create a sharper tobacco, right?
Sure, yeah.
In lieu of creating a sharp tobacco, you want more palate, you want more body, you want to be able to blend a cigar, and that's really where you can tell someone who has spent a lifetime blending cigars is working on fermentation because he's concerned with not what does our weight look like at the end, right? Because how many pounds did we produce that are sellable? How fermented it is? Is it 80% fermented? Is it need to get belled and go into bells for a long time? What he's really concerned with is what is our actual output? Like what are we yielding from that in a cigar, and what portion of that tobacco am I going to be able to use in a blend? Right. All the Nicaraguan tobacco in our cigars is from us. Now, we do use some tobaccos from different places in smaller amounts, but all the Nicaraguans are from us, and that gives us a really good advantage to be able to create a distinct, unique flavor profile and to be able to secure our supply chain. We grow right now about 300,000 pounds of tobacco per year.
Wow.
Last 5 years, that's about 1.5 million pounds under management with our brokers, and we have some fantastic broker partners that we work with on our tobacco. But that said, this is the first time that we're able to actually put that together into a blend. Now, the tobacco ends up composited just before it goes into bells, right? Mm-hmm. What they'll do is they'll take a stack of already sorted tobacco, and you probably rarely have seen this. I'll try to make a point next time I'm in Nicaragua to get some video or pictures of this. Yeah. But they actually make a different polone. They make a square polone, and the square polone is a compositing polone, right? So if we've ever come about a set of visos and a large grade A profile, and they're not quite homogeneous between each other, but they've broken over to the point where the tobacco doesn't have that sticky tacky texture to the tobacco. You're not buckling the veins because you don't want to break the vascular system of the tobacco. Right. You break the vascular system, it's pretty much all over for that leaf, right? That leaf's never really going to perform, into the blend the way that you want it to. So quite literally down to that little stem, right, needing to stay intact. But when we composite it into a square polone, that's a much briefer period of time, and it will composite really quick. But if you've already inoculated that tobacco with some of the richer, heavier oils from a Ligero, from grades of Viso that you're planning on stripping later, that inoculation process is what helps us create that vivid approach in the blend. And the only reason why I tell you this and why I'm saying this out on the internet so anyone can do it is I know they won't.
You're the only ones crazy enough to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's Esteban. I mean, if anyone wants a tutorial on how to do these things, we'll be glad to show you. The thing is, when you make little tweaks to tobacco, it has huge implications down the road in the supply chain. Right. And so, any of those tweaks that you make are going to, eventually end up, catching up to you. And it could be how the cigar ages, could be how it lays down. It could be a myriad of things.
Right. So have you not really, I'm not sure how pertinent the question is, but have you noticed that using this technique, does it have a significant effect on the nicotine levels of the tobacco that you use in your blends?
Yeah, I mean, nicotine levels are a difficult thing to forecast whenever you're, fermenting tobacco. Now, nicotine absorption is a whole nother thing, right? I'm no scientist surrounding nicotine itself, but I can tell you we're not doing anything artificial to enhance nicotine. We're not doing anything artificial to decrease it either. Our entire approach to fermentation, cigar making, all the way through is an all natural process, and at the very most we'll use nature to enhance what we're already doing. That's no different than if you look around our farms, you'll notice that all around our farms we've planted eucalyptus. You plant eucalyptus because the oil carries with the wind and it helps push out the insects and things that might want to make a home of the farm. We do the same thing with palm trees, right? Because beetles love the palm trees. So that's just an example of using nature and an organic, if you will, way of approaching tobacco. But as far as actual nicotine levels or something like that, I'd be no expert in telling you any of that.
Yeah. So let's talk about your background in tobacco. I know you're a tobacconist right now. You've been a tobacconist for quite a while now, haven't you?
Yeah. So, but my professional career was industrial cybersecurity.
Okay.
So that was really where I made all my money. Now, I always worked at a cigar shop. I always, pulled shifts as sometimes full time. I worked with Outlaw Cigar in Kansas City, and worked for them as they were opening up the South store. Then also worked for another small shop in Kansas City named Fidel's, owned by Ben Gardner out there. He also owns La Couture Cigar and Social there in Kansas City. So I just always maintained, side jobs or jobs with different cigar lounges. And, it had kind of followed my industrial career perfectly, because I always ran into people in cigar lounges that I wanted to work with, or that had companies that were interesting. And so, it became a really nice thing for my cybersecurity career, in industrial cybersecurity. But yeah, I spent a little over 10 years as either a full-time or part-time tobacconist at, multiple different lounges around Kansas City.
Yeah. So when was, you talked a little bit about how you moved to Nicaragua? The whole first of all, when was that? When did you first move down to Nicaragua?
Yeah, so I moved down to Nicaragua in 2019. That's when I got a house down there. I didn't make any kind of proclamation of leaving the United States or anything like that. The reality was I was just spending so much time in Europe and Asia, bouncing back and forth between there and the States. One time I had gone down to Nicaragua. I had a friend that used to make yearly trips, and he invited me out one time. I agreed. I really wanted to go anyway, and so I told him, I go, don't let me buy a house my first trip, right? Make me work for it. And so I did. I went down there, had a great time. I knew half the town, it seemed, from cigars. I had to go to London like right after that. So I went to London, bumming around Stonehenge. I was supposed to go to Jordan. Jordan wouldn't let me enter for visa problems and all that, because I'm a known hacker. You can look me up on. So I guess I have to be careful whenever I go to certain areas in the Middle East. But I called up my boss at that time, and I go, do you care where I live? And he goes, as long as you can get to an airport, I don't care at all. Yeah. So it was like $3,000 for a same day ticket to go to Nicaragua. It was $5,000 to go to my house in Kansas City. So I flew back to Nicaragua, got a house. Literally, I mean, it was that impulsive. So, yeah.
And then, so at that point, had you already known Esteban before you had gone to Nicaragua?
Yeah. I believe we had first met at the trade show.
Okay.
And there was something special about his factory. I mean, I used to stop by and see him all the time, and you could tell his approach to cigar making and the conventions of cigar making were tremendously different, right? Not different just to be different, but I always tell people, if you don't know Esteban very well, one of the best ways to understand him is he's like the Steve Jobs of Esteli, right? If he had like a Jeff Foxworthy personality, right?
Okay.
He's one of those guys that can get anything done. He's not opposed to technology. He's not opposed to trying new methods, right? And we come together really well on that. Actually, our aging room at the factory is a really prime example of that, where there had always been a way that aging rooms have been put together, and we wanted to go that next level. And Esteban really wanted to figure out, how do we understand cigar aging? Is it really aging, or are we putting them in a humidor? Mm-hmm. Are they equal, or are they unequal?
Right.
And he had never really had instrumentation to be able to record any of that. Okay. And in part because of me, but really largely because of Esteban, we don't put technology in place to remove workers or something like that. That doesn't really work with tobacco.
Right.
If you move someone off of something, you're going to find 20 other things for them to do. Right.
Exactly.
So if you're making an investment, you have to be making an investment that allows us a force multiplication on manufacturing on the floor. So one example of this is, we have these dehydrators, right, that we use for perfectly setting the humidity in our tobacco storage. And they're quite expensive devices. They're all computer controlled. And at the end of the day, all this device is really doing is it's preventing our people that are working the tobacco from having to manually control hydration of the tobacco at all times. Mm-hmm. So it's no different than maybe a Lajero wheel. You've probably seen a Ligero wheel where they strap the tobacco to a wheel and spin it around and all that to hydrate it and so on. It's really no particularly different than using that type of technology. So it's still the human touch that we're looking for. It's still someone's hand on the tobacco, but we want to be able to give them a lot more power, and that's what Esteban has been, really innovative throughout his career and doing. Right down to how we age cigars in high density cases versus putting them in half wills as you traditionally would.
Right. So let's talk about the blends in particular. That you've got 2 blends that you've released with Domain so far. I've heard rumors that there's possibly a third coming down the pike sometime soon. Off the record. But let's go back to those 2 blends and what was it that you and Esteban were trying to achieve with those blends, what you were shooting for, and the experience you wanted the consumer to have when they pick up an Agentropy, for example?
Yeah, well, I mean, we really wanted to, with the entire narrative of the company, right, was that we wanted people to be able to take part in something that was unique, not just, an edgy mockery of something that Esteban has done before or something like that. That was not a factor whatsoever. So if you're planning on smoking these cigars expecting them to be like anything Esteban's done before, you're probably not going to run into it. But what we wanted to do is we wanted to show range. We wanted to show what vertical integration can do with the tobacco, and hopefully you're experiencing that with Neutron there. And we really wanted to, come up with cigars that were going to persist and be culturally relevant into the future. And what does that mean? Relevant to us. The culture is there in Nicaragua. The community is here in the United States that we serve. So we want to continue to move that forward. And, when you're smoking a Domain cigar, we want you to feel like you're taking part in something special, because you are. I mean, it's been 5 years in the making. We started the factory 2 years ago. We just launched the brand about 2 months ago now. So throughout the entire process, we've had pretty much a financially insane approach to doing this, but it's the way to do it right. It's the way that if you were ever going to do this in a snow globe, Domain Cigars is attempting to do that. To control all of the factors around our production and our cigars, and that's pretty much it. I mean, the perfection in marketing and things of that nature, that's never done. That's always, you're always working towards something new on the marketing side. Yeah. But hopefully whenever you smoke Neutron and Agentropy, you can understand the range of tobacco that we have. We grow about 17 different varietals today. We lay down with the Desponique process certain tobaccos. We have traditional classic fermentation for Nicaragua that we do as well on a lot of tobacco. So we have a lot of depth and a lot of range in the tobacco that we actually have under management today. So we wanted to be able to show that off. And, I think with, Agentropy being a full body double Ligero Habano, we intentionally didn't call it strong. We're trying to, if you call a cigar strong, then the guys that smoke strong cigars, that's all they can zero.
They're like, oh, really?
They can't think of. Yeah, exactly. It's a. I always say the guys that like strong cigars are the same as like the Ligero guys. They're never, or not the Ligero, sorry, Lancero guys. They're never satisfied. They're satisfied for like 5 minutes, and then they have something more to complain about. But the thing is and I like a Lancero too. Don't get me wrong. It's just the thing is. When you actually are like me, like a pocket protector nerd, in tobacco, I'm a nerd of this, right? And we tend to be the most opinionated, and then you have the geeks in tobacco, that are have a lot of preferences around how the cigar's finished. Is it closed foot? Is it all these different details and so on. It's really easy to get carried away, right? And to make something that is so far outside of what the market is really ready to accept. So that was kind of the barrier that I wanted to draw a line around whenever we're putting together blends. And, I think with Agentropy being we didn't even tell people it was a double Ligero. It's a double Ligero cigar, and a lot of people don't even, technically know what that means. They don't know what a double Ajero really is, but it is a double Ajero Habano, which is, frankly, a little bit mad, and a full body Habano, which is not something that traditionally you would ever see. In fact, 20 years ago in cigar making, people were pretty afraid to use a lot of Habanos from Ecuador, just because of, combustion issues and so on. But working with Oliva Tobacco today, they've done a fantastic job with their vintage Habano that they're going. It's Ecuador Piloto in Ecuador, and it's homogenized extraordinarily well today, extraordinarily consistent. So creating a full body double Ajero, which a double Ajero and Habano, I don't think I've ever really seen together in a cigar description. For a myriad of problems, but being able to put that together into something that's unique and bold and special, it's really served us well. And the two blends are actually so close in sales. They're if we sell 10 of each, I think Neutron might be one cigar ahead. But depending on the shop, it really depends on the cigar shop too. The 6x60 of that Negentropy just flies off the shelf. That one. That's just wild. Yeah.
Well, it shouldn't surprise me. The 6x60 is a very American Vitola.
Yeah.
Speaking of Vitolas, you got two blends, but you make in both blends you do 9 different Vitolas, correct?
Yeah, 9 different sizes. Yeah.
Which I don't think a lot of people. Again, this goes to the casual cigar smoker. I don't think they really comprehend what that means. That's effectively like making 18 different cigars, really. It's
what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. It's not just a copy and paste of a recipe in just a different format. There's a lot goes into blending a cigar for a different Vitola altogether.
Yeah. And we can talk about that some. So we ratio blend. I mentioned earlier. So 52 ring gauge is the prime expression of that blend. That's what we work towards. And then as we branch out, we've been working on this with a broadleaf project. We have the worst kept secret. We've sent it out to a bunch of retailers already. But even in that project, for example, we put together the prime blend, we smoke it, we like it, we lay it down right. And then we have to go into how are we actually going to manufacture it? Because we ratio blend the different sizes, our feature sizes are those 9. So we make about 200 cigars of each of those. So that comes out to around 2,000 or so cigars that we're setting on. Sometimes we go 2,500 or 3,000.
Sure, yeah.
And then what Esteban and I both do is we take, basically every 10 cigars, we take one off the line, and then we test those, and then we write down different features for our QA. And that could be around tobacco selection. It could be around capping. It could be around finishing. So we write down all the notes for what they're going to run into. And then at the end of the day, we have to decide, does this really speak to us? Does it speak to us the way that other cigars in the line do? And does it have a permanent significance in our portfolio? Can we feature this? And with that project, we've now put together 6,000 variations of different cigars. We've restarted that whole process now about 4 or 5 times. I think we're on the 5th time that we've restarted that process. So when I get back to the factory, I'll probably share out some photos and videos of all of the variations of the number 7B that we've come up with. But when you do that ratio blending, that doesn't make it easier on us, because I can't just throw it against the wall. I have to make sure that prime blend will stretch out to a 6x60, right, and actually make sense. And then inside of the tobaccos, of the tobacco selection, so if it's 5 tobaccos, 7 tobaccos, 11 tobaccos, it doesn't matter how many tobaccos you use. You then have to go through and determine what sizing of bell you want for that. For example, if my leaf placement instructions are for the stip to tip, maybe I want at the head of the cigar for the tips of the leaves to be there because they're more aromatic, so that as you smoke down, you get more of the aromatics. But maybe I will rotate one of the ligeros the opposite direction, and that can totally change the cigar arounds. It's funny to think about, but it really does change the cigar. And in doing that, we have to select: do we want small leaves, medium leaves, large, extra large? What density of compounds do we want to be able to maintain that size? And that's really, if you want to ratio blend cigars properly and adequately, having years of tobacco growth and a portfolio of tobacco to go back and keep those blends consistent is paramount to your supply chain. And it's really a topic that I guess we don't hear too much stateside around, leaf sizing and selection, and then also leaf placement. I mean, I know factories that go entirely leaf tips on the foot, so that you get heavy aromas, right? And you get a cooler startup to the smoke. And then I know other ones that go entirely the other way, but they'll face all the tobaccos the same direction.
Right.
And that's a variation that we have to figure out as we work on the cigar. So yeah, right down to blend placement, there can be a lot of nuance and discussion that we have to go through.
Yeah, it sounds like it, man. I mean, these are all little factors that, like you said, if one little variation can alter the entire profile of a cigar. And again, it's like one of these things that the casual smoker just does not think about. They, is this cigar good or not? That's all they really think about. And and understandably, it's not that that's the wrong way to think about it, but as a blender, as someone who's creating blends, you're always having to think about these things. And I love talking about stuff like this, and I hope it's not. Yeah. I hope it's not boring to anybody who's watching right now. This is the sort of stuff that I love talking about. Awesome. Looking back, when you guys first started Domain, I mean, is there anything? I mean, it's only been you just launched. The factory's only been around for so long, but I mean, is there anything in retrospect that you would look back and say, I wish we had done this a little bit different, or maybe we could have done this a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, there's, perfection is the enemy of profitability, right? So definitely on the, labels, the bands, there's areas there that, I want to tweak and I want to improve, working on right down to sourcing the foil. So we actually, this is an area of being a cigar maker that gets really boring quick. So your audience might tune out, but going and meeting with the people that make your foil, right? Going and meeting with the people that make the dyes, and figuring out what their resolutions are, and being able to share that with your group of digital artists that are trying to work their way towards your vision. That's something that if you're starting a cigar brand, you don't estimate how long that whole process will take. Yeah. Getting those people to even meet with you in the first place,
or probably how expensive it ends up being too.
Yeah, it's extraordinarily expensive. So, right now to get the level of stock that I really want, that I deeply desire, for our box labels and our bands, I have to go out and basically buy 1 million cigars worth of paper, and that's thank you. And I like the bands too. Don't get me wrong. I
love the band work, and I love the style with like the base band that's a little bit bigger, and then you have the overlay band on top of that, which I have to say, now I've only had 2, but both of them came off very easily. So whoever's applying the damn things are doing it right. So kudos for that. It's a big pet peeve of mine.
It was of mine as well. So we have a special thing that we're doing with the glue. It's the same glue that they use to actually make the cigar. Sure. So it's cellulose-based glue. It's pectin glue. But with it, we're able to get that nice release. It holds real well and it releases real nice. But there's still, there's always improvements. These things kind of escape before they're perfect, right?
Right.
And on Neutron, when you put a camera on it and you don't have the best lighting, right now here at Lit here in St. Louis, they lowered the lighting for the evening, so if I take a picture of a Neutron band, I got one right here actually. it looks kind of dark. You know, it looks
Right.
kind
Yeah.
of dark. So little things like that we want to keep, you know, massaging and get them to just be perfect details. So that's really my quest. But you know, Esteban and I work on all these details together. Every time, you know, we have a change that we're going to make, or you know, something that we have to do in the factory, because ultimately when I'm not there, he has to enforce, you know, what we're doing on branding and packaging. And Anthony, his son as well, who works as a production supervisor for us, he does a lot of those details and really knocks it out of the park. But it's, you know, it's something that you're always working towards, you know.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, I mean, I did take some photos last night of the Gentropy, and I love the way the color scheme of the band works with the color of the wrapper. I think it pops, it stands out. It has a way of almost emphasizing how beautiful the wrapper is, which is,
Yeah, thank you.
I like it when a band can, you know, be a compliment to the cigar, which is what it's supposed
Yeah.
to be. It's not just supposed to make it stand out. It's also supposed to
Right.
kind of buttress the cigar a little bit for the consumer, so they have a greater desire to smoke it. These things look fantastic. Was what I'm trying to get to. Is
Okay.
the bands really look really good.
Thank you. I
One of the
appreciate it.
best looking bands I've seen in a while for a regular production. So talking about regular production, you talked about how you wanted to ensure any blends that you did for your catalog maintained a significance, not only for the market but for you personally as a
Yeah.
creator. You want this to have, you know, something that you still have an interest of producing. Let's
Yeah.
talk a little bit about replication of a blend, you know, year over year, and the factors that go into deciding what a blend's going to be, knowing whether or not I can redo this for the
Yeah.
next batch of tobacco that comes in.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a pretty simple answer. It really goes back into catalog and portfolio tobacco. So, you know, do you have a consistent approach year over year of that tobacco to call on? And that's where having that 5 years of tobacco growth, you know,
Right.
Condega tobaccos really only start to get called on normally at about 7 years on the market. Normally, people will be calling on it through a broker at, you know, 5 years or so of Esteli, and then a secondary is Condega. But that said, we're at that 5 year mark now where we're finally getting to see what this tobacco can do. And we have a deep catalog of it now. So in future expansion, we have to look forward and see, do we want to make an adjustment to how we lay down polones? Do we want to
Right.
make an adjustment to belling? Do we, you know, and all of that, you know, if you move, you know, one leaf by 10%, right? Well, that's, you know, and depending on how many leaves you have in your blend, that's just offset your blend that much more, right? Now, is it going in a positive direction or a negative direction? And that's really where, you know, like whenever it comes to wrapper is a much more obvious way to do this. You know, you take a cigar that is already from your previous lot, take the wrapper off, put the new one on, lay it down for a minute, then come back to it, see if it hits the same way. You know, that one's a pretty simple one. Now, whenever you actually go into the bunch, the filler tobacco is probably one of the most underestimated elements of cigar making. That's what everyone runs out of. And the problem is, you know, it doesn't really ever go for more than, say, $10 or so a pound, depending on what you're using. You know, if you're using Carrillo or something like that, you might get into some higher prices. But, you know, the filler tobacco is normally what people underestimate, and they can't get enough of it. And then they have to switch to a different region or a different, you know, fermentation style. And it just ends up moving the blend into something that the customer really wasn't expecting.
Right.
And, you know, it's unfortunate that happens, but a lot of that happens around securing supply chain. And,
Sure.
You know, this kind of touches on the three waves of the whole tobacco industry, right? So, and I can go over that real quick if you want.
Yeah,
Me to.
please. Yes.
So the first wave of cigar making is the Cuban exodus. Basically, that's what's defined our industry. So upon the Cuban exodus, you have, you know, now an agricultural product, tobacco, that has brands around it that have national association. And before you had a little bit of that, but it was mostly Ybor City, West Tampa, where you had, you know, the heaviest inoculation. And
Right.
Cuba itself really wasn't known for tobacco making or cigar making the way that it is today, because they were pre-Exodus. Now people were buying tobacco from them, but the national brands were pretty much only Wisconsin and West Tampa were really big cigar makers. So it was more of a local thing. So the Cuban Exodus is the first wave of cigar makers. And when that happened, that defined our industry the same way that in coffee, you have the first wave of coffee makers, which is Folgers and Maxwell House. They took an agricultural product, wrapped a brand around it. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if you move forward into what is the second wave of cigar making? That was the direction and commission wave. And what that was it was a bunch of people in the 90s who saw an opportunity, loved cigars, enjoyed cigars, built it into our culture, and they basically went to the first wave cigar makers that had gone to Nicaragua, Dominican Republic, and Honduras, and they said, "Hey, Mr. First Wave cigar maker, put this label on it, put it in this box, right? I know how to market it, I know how to brand it, and get it in people's hands, right?" And that actually started to create some of the most significant companies that we have in this industry to this day, and we're fortunate to have them. The reality is the second wave of coffee, for example, is the Mermaid Corporation. It was, Starbucks, right? It was having a unified menu, unified offering, and being able to get it on every corner in the United States.
Right.
So it's a very similar pathway that we see with cigar making, where, okay, now that we understand a first and second wave cigar maker, what is a third wave cigar maker? It's being able to exact quality control at every single stage of the cigar's production and life cycle. So that means I need to be able to control the soil. I need to be able to control the tobacco that grows in that soil. I need to be able to look at the polones. I need to be able to turn those polones ourselves. We need to be able to manufacture ourselves. We need to be able to distribute and supply and have a brand that allows us to control that final mile of delivery to the customer. And that's right down to where you land the cigar at. That's why we're happy to be in a lounge like Lit here in St. Louis, which is ran by a great, very strong family that's put together a fantastic lounge here. And of course, this is the type of people that speak to a product like ours.
Right. Yeah.
So we're really glad that they have the product in here. So, but that's really the third wave of cigar making, is being able to control quality control all the way down at each stage. So those are the three waves. So we consider ourselves a third wave cigar maker, and we hope that others will follow. We hope that other people will garner in this, really kind of financially insane proposition. But in doing so, we didn't make any of these choices because they were convenient or a fast way to get on the market, or the easiest way to get access to, premium tobacco or something like that. We made all these choices out of passion, and that's one of the key things that we hope actually speaks to people as they smoke our cigars.
Right. So, it's definitely a trend that I'm starting. To me, I've been noticing the ones that I spoke to this a little bit earlier when I talked about, the vertically integrated companies are the ones that really seem to be a cut above. And I've been just noticing on because I'm one of these smokers that I rarely smoke the same cigar more than once in a given month. I'm always smoking something new. I do cigar reviews, so I'm always smoking something new.
Okay.
There are definitely ones that stand out that once they hit really, really well, I go out and I buy a box because I know I'm going to enjoy that cigar multiple times after that.
Yeah.
But I'm always looking to play the field as much as I can, because I'm always looking to see what people can bring to the table, what different companies and factories bring to the table. And I started noticing things. I started paying more attention to the factory from where the cigars that I really enjoyed came from. And sure. Most of the cigars that I really, really enjoy come from like 5 or 6 different factories. Those are the ones that really, really hit it out the park for me. And wouldn't you know, they're the ones that happen to be the ones that are overseeing the fermentation themselves. They're the ones that are more vertically integrated. They tend to be a little bit smaller in scale. So are there any players in the game right now that you could just give us a couple examples of ones you think are kind of belong in that third wave of cigar making?
I don't want to speak for any other particular company. I think that there are people that are moving in that direction, or would like to appear in that direction. Now, the reality is that doing it out of the gate vertically integrated
Very
is,
difficult.
I don't think it's ever been done, at least not in this facet. But that said, I mean, a lot of people will start with a brand and they work their way down to soil, or they start with the farm and they work their way to the brand. Now,
Correct. Yeah.
they have significant contributions as well, and I'm sure they make some good cigars. But I got a warning whenever I went into Esteli, and I had a very nice family that owns a lot of land in Esteli, and and I met up with them, and they told me, they go, Daniel, if you do what we think you might be thinking about doing, if you come to this town and you just have a bag of multiple millions of dollars, and you just start buying up everyone, they're like, you're gonna walk away with pennies on the dollar.
Yeah.
And I go, no, you don't know me that well. I know that I'm too dumb to do any of that kind of stuff, and I'm too dumb to think that I'm going to be able to go out and grow tobacco myself and all that kind of stuff. But that's where you need someone that's actually been through multiple seasons. Look, you get good years in tobacco, you get bad years in tobacco. But if you've only been rotating Polones for 10 years, right, it takes 10 years to become a master at that, because that's only 10 years of growth, right, that you've been able to work with and that you've been able to mitigate. And having someone like Esteban that's been doing this for 40 years now and been doing it at such an incredibly high level, I knew that if I were ever going to do something like this, I would have to do it through that type of medium. I was under no delusion that cigar making wasn't really damn hard. Right. It's one of those, other companies are, they're doing interesting things. They're doing exciting things as well. We're a company that I guess strongly believes that a high tide raises all ships. And
absolutely.
If everybody else is producing good product and we have healthy competition, then that's fantastic. We have no concern about that. If we're the only ones making high quality cigars, then there's probably a pretty big problem.
Yeah, we got a serious problem.
So there's just going to be things that people have a preference for, maybe more than others. But I don't really know how to answer that question exactly as to who to name as doing what. But I'll tell you this. I mean, we spoke about the different waves of cigar making, right? Part of the reason why what we've focused on through like marketing of cigars and so on has really been like the blend, right? Well, the blend is really where we write the history that we've had with that tobacco, okay? Because so much of our time with the tobacco is really in bells, is in polones, is being sorted. The number of times that the tobacco gets sorted again and again and again and gone through, that's really, when we're putting the blend together, we're really writing our history, our performance into that tobacco, right? The other area that's been focused on maybe unjustly too much is tobacco growth. Well, tobacco growth is, fantastic. It's a great topic. It's, it's a nightshade. It has a lot of unique factors around growing it. And the reality though is most all tobacco that gets laid down into a polone, there's three types of people in the valley. There's hot dogs and hamburgers and steak, right? As far as cigars are concerned, pretty much all tobacco starts out as steak, right? Because you can't really afford to lay down the hot dog and hamburger grade of tobacco, right? You really need the tobacco to be, perfect, right? Or as close to perfect as you can get, and that's, one of the photos that we have of Esteban up on the website, and we've posted to social media and stuff like that. He's standing in a field of a hybrid that we've been working on. It's a Corojo Habano hybrid that we're working on. And, and he wanted to go to that field to shoot the photos that we were doing, because he goes, this tobacco is perfect. He goes, you'll see different tobacco throughout your life, but he goes, this tobacco that you see right here is absolutely perfect. There's not a blemish anywhere on any one of these plants. I mean, they homogenize beautifully. They're growing beautifully. And that's pretty much where you always want to start. Now, there's, been a lot of lofty talk about, you need to do this with soil, and we need to, you need to have a 6-ton tractor.
Right.
Look, you can't get some of this equipment into most farms in Nicaragua, so it's illogical to believe that you're going to be doing, these farming styles or these really elaborate farming styles all over Esteli or Condega. There's no way to get the equipment into most of the farms. So 5% of the farmable land you're going to be able to get a 6-ton tractor into.
Yeah.
So we have a tractor at one of the farms. We have one tractor, but most of the work is done still by ox, turning of the soil and all these types of things. And that some people think there's got to be an improvement that you can make there, and yeah, you could make a mechanized improvement, but the only thing that's going to do is raise the investment that I have, because I still need the labor in so many other areas. So so sorry, I kind of got on a tangent, but
that's good. It's good.
It's a difficult question to answer, and I don't, we're not really trying to throw stones any direction. So.
No, not at all. So looking forward. First of all, who was the one that decided on the name for the company, Domain Cigars?
Yeah, that'd be me.
Totally you.
So Domain started out as a coffee company.
Okay.
So I had a coffee company. It was called Domain Cold Brew up until 2019, going into the pandemic. 2020 was about the last year of operations for the coffee company. And we had over 300 locations in the United States and the Midwest that we sold our coffee at. We had a cafe and everything like that. You gotta sell a lot of bottles of $3.50 coffee to retire me out of cybersecurity. So after about 3.5+ years of doing it, it was kind of at the point where I needed to determine if I was going to get a life or if I was going to, continue just working the rest of it. So, I had no idea moving to Nicaragua that we were going to, start this company or anything like that. And there was, Domain was kind of always meant to be an exploration into flavor for me personally. Esteban didn't have a name for a cigar company. He had ideas in the past around what he would name a cigar company, and he did, but that name was taken already. So we had to figure out, what is something that we can both get behind that, has value to us, has significance to us personally. And the same thing with the factory. Esteban, he didn't want to put his family name on the factory. It wasn't because he didn't, love and respect his family or want to memorialize them, but he was just nervous about his, past partnership didn't work out. And I told him, this is you. I'm here to help tell the story of the Disla family. I'm the medium for which we're going to be able to tell this fantastic story. And because he doesn't speak English, but he's always wanted to do this. I mean, he actually sent Uraldi, he's our head of agriculture. Uraldi went and lived in the United States for 2 years, worked at a cigar shop to learn the U.S. side of the business. And now we can't get him out of the farm. He just loves growing tobacco. I mean, literally, if I figured out, I've tried to take him out for steak and everything like that, and I figured out he likes Pizza Hut. We have Pizza Hut in Esteli, so if I order Pizza Hut, I can get Uraldi to show up at the house and eat a slice of pizza with us. But he just loves growing tobacco. I mean, that's his. He's just so passionate about it. Not unlike his father, right? In that degree, and Anthony the same way. Anthony is, he's all about the factory, and I go, this is your family. I was talking about this with Esteban. I go, this is your family. It has to be the Disla name, and I'm involved. Of course, we're 50-50 partners all the way through on every area of the business, but. It was really important for me to have something that he holded really dear, and that is, creating that dynasty for his family.
Excellent. So, looking forward with Domain, what are the plans moving forward with the catalog? What are some of the things you were trying to get into tobacco-wise that you want to explore and bring to the market?
Well, we're interested in all areas of tobacco. We don't have a large wrapper presence right now, and we have to we have to, to work any kind of wrapper, we have to retool things. And, so we're interested in playing around with some different wrappers and so on. But, that said, I mean, we have some fantastic partners that we work with today. We have some, projects into the future that, we have scheduled out with just, some fantastic people we work with. Leave It Tobacco, the entire team over at Leave It Tobacco in Tampa has been working with us. That's Pro Sinixa and including Noxa. Really fantastic partners to have. And then also Tanixa, Gilberto Oliva from Oliva Cigar. He, of course, doesn't have anything to do with Oliva Cigar today, but he still owns and operates Tanixa, and they've been fantastic partners with us. So, together with all that in mind, we just have a mission to create culturally relevant cigars and to actually break down that velvet rope between the cigar makers. And we want to do a lot more media in the future to help describe some of these technical areas of cigar making. If I say Lagota to you or something like that, or Panuela, or does that even ring a bell
Not really, no.
to you? So that's a cigar manufacturing technique, and you probably know about like intubado or book folding or something like that on bunching. But there's so many areas of cigar making that we want to break open. And there have been a lot of handbooks in the past that have been made around cigar making, and I've read them. There's not a lot in there that is necessarily how we do anything. but actually, we want to be able to show that side of cigar making. So we want to do some YouTube in the future and things of that nature, and kind of create some educational series around that'll help break down those barriers. But as far as portfolio, I don't want to elaborate too much around this cigar is coming out, that cigar is coming out. It'll definitely happen when it does, but we're ready for it. We have a lot planned. We designed over 7 different series of cigars today, marketing and everything, all already. But the reality is we really need the tobacco to speak to us, and that's really going to drive, where we go into the future.
Very good. So before I let you go, and I want to thank you for your time. This has been great. I've been loving talking all the shop here with you. This has been fantastic.
Yeah.
If looking over everything that you've done so far, looking at the process that you're doing right now, what is the single most difficult thing to have to deal with running the cigar company as it is?
Oh man, invoices.
So it's like every other business, basically.
Yeah, it's like every other. No, I always tell people, I'm like the Steve Carell of the factory, right? Whenever it comes to the factory or it comes to like, Palones or something like that, I get to ask all the fun questions, technical, nerdy questions. But at the end of the day, my best ideas are like, let's get pizza for lunch. Like that's my super valuable contribution. And then, Esteban's kind of the exactly. So we do have really high quality toppings. Yeah, that's another joke. Like if cigar making doesn't work out, Esteban and I are going to open Little Caesars.
Make a pizza place.
Little Caesars is crushing it in Nicaragua right now. But they have people waiting in line for like 30 minutes for a $5 pizza. Like they are just they're going all out. If I walk up to Little Caesars and I have to wait like a minute, I'm walking away. Like if it's not hot and ready, if it's caliente listo, no, okay, adios. Like I'm out. Okay, like if it's not ready to go, but no, really, I mean, for me, the hardest part of the challenging part is probably marketing and packaging, right? Because we don't own that, we don't control that today.
Right.
We don't have the printers ourselves. We have to work with third parties, and we're on their timeline, and that's probably the most challenging aspect there. And then we have 100 people in our entire enterprise. We have 60 regulars at Embrigadillo every day, and then we have our agricultural hands, which is probably 25 or so. That team varies, and then about 14 or so regular in the factory. So It's a lot of people to manage, but I mean, Esteban does this, like just like a true master. I mean, you never know the guy's under any kind of stress or pressure.
Right.
And we've got 3 farms, 3 key farms, Pueblo Nuevo and Condega and Esteli, District Esteli, that we maintain. And frankly, just working with him at this point in his career. And then this is part of why it's so important that we break down that velvet rope and remove those barriers so people can really hear from someone that, has had all the trial and error. And, if there were any rough edges whatsoever to his cigar making, they've all been, depleted in the last 10 years of his career. And he's continued to put out a level of performance that has created some of the most triumphant cigars in the industry. So anyway, so, I mean, we appreciate you having us on to talk about all this.
Absolutely.
Love to come back and chat with you when we have more cigars to talk about. But go get Neutron and New Gentropy today. How do you like the cigar, by the way? I didn't ask you.
Okay, so I loved the New Gentropy last night. It was a great end of the day cigar. I had it with some bourbon on ice, and it was just great. It was a great evening, and I just wanted to sit down and smoke something of what you guys did before I got to talk with you, and I was really impressed with it. And I've always talked to people. It's like I don't get to enjoy a cigar as much when I'm having to talk to somebody. Like I enjoy the cigar the best when I'm by myself, undistracted. This thing, man, the Neutron is just it's scratching that itch, man. It's really good. It's got a really balanced flavor profile. It's got just the right amount of oomph in there to make you feel like you're experiencing something. It's balanced, it's smooth, it's got great texture, and I've already alluded to the performance of it. This thing has been burning like a champ, and the ash was just a thing of beauty too. So I really like the Neutron quite a bit. It's really good. I'll be buying more because this was awesome. This was a good cigar, and I am partial to Mexican San Andreas. I do like that as a wrapper. I think it's pretty when it comes to Maduro wrappers. I think it's a really nice looking cigar. Yeah. I like the toothy sort of wrappers, and this one definitely had that. So congratulations on this endeavor. I think this is going to be something that we'll be talking about in the future. I'm glad we were able to sit down. I'm always excited when there's new companies, particularly when you have someone like Esteban who has such a storied history in the industry already and a clear mastery of his craft. So that is exciting. So really appreciate you sitting down, and best wishes to you and Esteban moving forward. Really looking forward to what you guys have coming out in the near future.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thanks for having us again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. Right. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in for this live stream. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was informational to you. It definitely was for me. I really enjoyed everything he had to share with us, and we'll see you guys in the next video. Till then, smoke a good one.